We have a 1995 Ford F-150 in today. We've determined that the fuel pump in the front tank has failed, so we're going to walk through the steps in order to replace it. Before we begin the repair, we want to remove the negative battery cable. We will now bleed the pressure out of the system using the pressure gauge, making sure to catch any fuel that you bleed out of the system into a safe container. In order to do a proper fuel pump replacement, we need to clean the inside of the tank, and that will require the removal of the tank. First, we'll remove the fuel filler hose from the filler pipe. You'll notice inside the fuel filler hose is a vent pipe. That will stay in position as we lower the tank. Now we will disconnect the tank straps and lower the tank partially to gain access to the electrical connector and the fuel line fittings. Now that we've lowered the tank to this position, we'll disconnect the electrical connection and disconnect the fuel line fittings. There is a safety retainer on each line fitting. You will have to remove this before inserting your removal tool. Keep in mind there may be residual pressure on this line. And we can disconnect our emissions hose. We'll have to fish the filler tube over the top of the frame. Now that we've got the tank out from the vehicle, we will clean the outside of the tank before removing the pump. This has a locking ring on it that we will turn counterclockwise using our non-ferrous punch. We'll remove the locking ring. Now we can remove the fuel pump module from the tank. The reservoir at the bottom of the module will contain some residual fuel. Be sure and capture this into a safe container. We will now need to remove the module from the hanger assembly. Remove the retaining screws holding the sending unit in place. Remove the screw that attaches the hanger assembly to the module assembly. In with your module assembly is included a fuel strainer, 3 tank seals, a couple fuel line retainers, a couple wire connectors, and the wedge that will be used to remove the module assembly from the hanger. Install the wedge in place and pry the hanger from the module assembly. By using the wedge, this holds the retainer in place as we remove the tube from the retainer. Cut the electrical connection. Now we are ready to install a new AirTex module assembly onto the hanger. Install the retaining screw. We can reattach our sending unit, making sure that the wire for the sending unit does not interfere with the float arm assembly. The leads on the module are longer than needed. You can trim them to an appropriate length. We will strip the ends of the wires back and install our butt connectors. Be sure and crimp the wire with the appropriate crimping tool. You can give it a slight tug to make sure it's crimped properly. Now we're ready to install the fuel strainer onto the bottom of the module assembly. Always be sure when you install this strainer that you position it where it does not affect the movement of the float arm. At this point we need to drain the remaining fuel into a safe container and then clean the inside of the tank. We want to be sure that the tank is as clean as possible to allow a clean environment for the fuel pump. On the opening in the tank there is a locating notch here and here. On the bottom of the flange is a tab where these set into the locating notch. Before we completely set the unit into the tank, we want to locate our sealing ring. In with the pump assembly there are 3 sealing rings. Be sure and pick the appropriate sealing ring for your tank. If you look at the top of your flange, you'll see locating arrows that point out the tabs that are on the bottom of the flange. Once we have the unit installed into the tank, we're ready to install our locking ring. Now we can install the tank back into the vehicle. We will have to fish the filler tube over the frame as we raise the tank. At this point, we can go ahead and make our electrical connection and reposition the connector on the frame. Now we'll reinstall our emissions tube. We can reinstall our fuel lines, safety retainers, as we finish raising the tank into its position, work your filler hose through the vent hose so that we do not have a kink. Now we'll reposition our filler hose onto the filler tube and tighten the clamp. Now we will install and tighten the fuel tank straps. Now that we've installed the new Airtex fuel pump module, we're ready to reconnect the negative battery cable and cycle the key in order to charge the system. We'll start the vehicle and monitor pressure to assure that it's within vehicle specification. To remove the gauge, we'll shut the engine off and bleed the pressure from the system using the pressure relief on the gauge, making sure to capture any fuel in a safe container.